What's up, Homestead apprentices? What's going on? When you come out here, you're going to leave with more knowledge than you had, a lot more. You're going to learn things that you didn't even know that you needed to have. You're going to also experience things that are going to lead you to need more knowledge also, just things that aren't even on your radar, right? We go by trees all the time. We walk onto a piece of property and we look at the trees that are around. And then we see which trees we can remove. You have to have sunlight on the ground to grow a garden. You have to have trees away from your home, because if trees come down, they'll crush your home. Now, that's not such a big deal when the trees are little, but as the trees get larger, that becomes a bigger deal. Which trees are we going to remove? Where's the home site going to be? Where's the water collection sources going to be? And the best time to plant trees are 10 years ago. The next best time is yesterday. So when you start planting trees, you get and collect the trees that you want to put in. Ideally, they produce some kind of crop, or they give you a hardwood for firewood or lumber in the future to make dimensional lumber on your bandsaw mill out of. But we go buy these trees, and we get these trees from Home Depot, Lowe's, wherever, or we order expensive trees like from fastgrowingtrees.com, and we bring them in and we dig a hole where we want it and we put it in, and we always put that tree where we want it, and usually that tree where we want it is never where it needs to be. So we're going to show you where that tree needs to be and why we did it our way. Our way is not necessarily the best way. It's the way that we did it, and I can show you a lot of trees we put in that are no longer there, and I can show you trees that have taken off and made it. Now, when you pull the tree out of the pot, we usually just stick it in the hole, and we have this perception as the tree grows and looks better next year that it's going to continue to go. But a lot of times those roots just run around in a circle inside that same hole, and they never run out, and that tree grows up 2-3 years, and you'll even get fruit off of it for 2 or 3 years, and then all of a sudden that tree dies because we didn't plant it correctly. We're going to expose you to that. We're going to show you how to correctly plant that tree. We're going to show you how to propagate those trees. We're going to show you how to produce fruit off of those trees, and then where to put them in, and then where also not to put them in. But you don't know that you need to know that. A lot of people especially who have never done any homesteading, gardening, any of this type of stuff, they go buy a piece of property and then it's just completely overwhelming. What do we do first, right? And how much of it do we do? And we end up running in 10, 15 different directions, and we don't really accomplish anything. A lot of times you get a piece of property and you go buy an instant farm. Like when you get into rural communities, they will have flea markets and, once a week areas where you go meet and people sell stuff and flea market swap meet type stuff, but inevitably there's animals there. When Lance came and lived with us for a few years, when he first got here, he was big on food as medicine and we should plant a garden. So we went to a flea market that I knew of that would have some different vegetables and stuff that we could buy and bring back and start a garden. Well, we also came back with a mama goat with 2 baby goats and 2 Pyrenees dogs, and we got a couple ducks and we got some chickens, and we bought about a half a dozen rabbits and we brought them back. We didn't have any caging. Like, what are we going to do with these things? So where do you set these things out? Where do you, the closer it is to your home where you reside, the more often you're going to go there. Which way does the wind blow? Where do you want your chickens? I don't want my chickens right up against my house because you're going to have the bugs, sharing that common wall. Where do you want your pigs at? Downwind, definitely not upwind, right? The further it is, the less you're going to go and interact with them, but also the less smell you're going to have. You're going to have crops where you're going to grow crops, whether you're going to eat those crops or you're going to use those crops to feed to things that you eat that, also eat those crops. But you're going to want a kitchen garden, right? You're going to want to be able to go out there and get those herbs and get those things that you use on a constant basis. So a lot of times when we make dinner, it's literally just meat on a cast iron pan. What do I want to eat with that? I just walk out and grab whatever I'm going to use, whether it's thyme, oregano, basil, whatever I'm pulling. I just go out and clip those literally 5 minutes right as I'm making breakfast. A lot of people get a piece of property and they see trees. How are we going to cut those trees up? Or there's trees inevitably down on a piece of property. Property that is tangled up and has been logged in the past usually has wood that's been down and has been sitting there. So it's always a mess. How do we remove that? What do we do? How do we cut it smaller to get it out of there? Well, chainsaw is always the answer. What chainsaw do you need? If you're only going to have one chainsaw and you're limited by budget, are you better off with a bigger chainsaw or a smaller chainsaw? Which brand of chainsaw? Sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't matter. How do you safely use that chainsaw? Everybody gets a chainsaw and they're super excited about, firing that up and going and cutting some wood. And they'll walk out into the woods with their chainsaw and not have any eye protection. As soon as you get those wood chips in your eye and then you're cutting and you're messing with it, now you're not paying attention to where that bar and chain is because you're messing with your hand. Those are all issues, right? Are you going to put chaps on every time? What if you receive an injury? Why do you need tourniquet training? Why do you need wound packing training? And that stuff should go with you every time you carry a chainsaw, right? It should literally be in the kit or even attached to the saw in some cases. Why do we know that? Because we did all of that stuff wrong, every bit of it. Do you stand on the left side or the right side of the chainsaw? Do you let the weight of the chainsaw carry that blade through that tree? You're going to learn all of that, right? And why do we know we're doing it right? Because we brought experts in. We did it wrong for so long. And then once you received a little bit of training and you watched a guy do that and he explained why he's doing those things, it clicks. It just makes sense. And you will save a lot of time and you will remove a lot of danger and the real possibility of emergency room and life-changing accidents. So 30 minutes, hour of instruction can literally save you a different future for the rest of your life, a different negative future if you use those things incorrectly. So that's a big one. Medical's only as good as the medical stuff you have, right? You can do some when you have knowledge and less equipment. You can get by with some stuff. When you have equipment and no knowledge, it doesn't work backwards like that, right? Why do you have a tourniquet with you at all times? Why do you have wound packing material and gauze with you at all times? Now, if it's in the vehicle and you're out in the woods with your chainsaw and you cut yourself, that doesn't matter how many tourniquets you have in the truck. Tourniquet needs to be with you with the saw. And the easy way to have that with you all the time is to have it in a pocket or in a pouch on your belt line. Why do you need that? Which tourniquet? For so long, we saw people just go, I'll just use, the Boy Scouts are like, we'll just make a tourniquet with a belt. Kind of, not really. It doesn't do the same thing as the proper $30 tourniquet. You can get tourniquets, right? We're going to provide training. You're going to have real training on how to apply this tourniquet. You're going to do it in some stressful situations. You're going to do it in some static situations. We're going to put Doppler radar on there to show you that, yes, it does in fact stop the flow of blood. It stops the heartbeat below the application. And you're going to know that you're doing that correctly. It doesn't take a long time to teach you this. A lot of people have this idea from watching TV shows. They don't want to do it because it's not the super fun thing, right? They want to buy the guns and the gear and all the shiny stuff. They want to buy the 4Runner truck and put a winch on the front and the back and all the special bumpers, but they don't have the $35 tourniquet. You're way more apt to use that $35 tourniquet on any given day of your life to and from work than you are any of that other stuff in the entirety of the rest of your life. So we're going to teach you that. We're going to teach you a little bit of combatives. We're going to teach you a little bit of marksmanship. We're going to teach you a little bit of tactics. And I say we, that's not me. Those are experts. You're going to receive that training from experts in the field, people that do that stuff for a living. They're coming in and you're going to have exposure to them and you're going to have education and you're going to learn to operate single as well as 2-man, 3-man. You're going to learn to operate in a group. It's going to build camaraderie. It's going to build teamwork, and it's also going to help you learn how to work with other people who you might not have known in the past or been comfortable with if you have, issues with that kind of stuff. You're going to come together as a team. We're going to do a lot of projects that you're going to try to figure out how to do it with one person, but it's a very different project when you have 6 people versus one person. 6 people can get a lot of stuff done that one guy just can't get done. How many times do we go to do things on the weekend and it becomes a much bigger task, or it takes so much longer, or it involves other things because you don't just have a couple of other sets of hands there? And if you have the ability to have extra hands and all of you know what the goal is, you've done this, you've seen this, you've experienced this, then it's just that much simpler. There's so, and you might build a completely different project if you have just help. If you just have a couple of people, the project might come out very different than if you try to just cobble it together yourself. I'm not saying that's not doable, but oftentimes it's a lot better and the outcome is better when you have more people. It's just like using large wood. If you build a pole barn with 4x4s, yeah, you'll get a pole barn with 4x4s and it'll be up there and it'll have a roof. It's not going to last the same as a pole barn made out of 6x6s or 8x8s or 10x10s on your verticals. And then instead of running 2x6s across to set your rafters on, running 2x12s and running them on both sides of those 6x6 or 8x8s and then bolting them together. Very, very different structure. Very, very difficult to work with one person to put that structure together with that heavier wood. So you're going to have exposure to all of those things. You can take chickens and you can set them out in a pinned area, just in a rectangle fence that's an acre by an acre. And those chickens will be there for a while until they're not, until something finds them and feeds on them, right? What kind of structures do you need? What do you need to overnight those animals? What do you need to protect those animals? What happens when you get aerial predators? What happens when foxes realize that those animals are there? Or raccoons, right? And we have this perception, okay, we'll get them to coop up into a coop at night and we'll lock them up. What happens when that raccoon realizes that it can get under that wire? What happens when that raccoon reaches through there? There's a lot of times people come in and their rabbits or chickens are in the cages, but they are maimed, dead, or dying. How do you negate that? What's the standoff of that? How do we use guardian dogs to protect against that? What makes that all easier, right? There's a lot of ways to accomplish the same thing, but there's other ways that are much simpler. And a lot of us, let's just be real, a lot of us have jobs during the day, right? So we are not full-time farmers. A lot of full-time farmers today hold a real job in order to be able to pay for full-time farming. When society changes, or if you are able to engineer your life in a manner that changes, then you're able to put more time into farming, food production, and living off of your property and making your property, give you a product. But that changes drastically. But until that happens, we need to know the easier ways to do this. There might come a time when those resources aren't available and we can't just order those things in, right? Aerial netting is a good one. I was thinking about that this morning. When we have aerial predators, we can put up some vertical poles, we can put them into the ground, or we can brace them so that they stand up in some manner. Now, if we're running a bunch of vertical poles, are we going to run and connect them across the top so they don't blow over, or are we going to put them into the ground so that they don't blow over? Netting. We can get all kinds of shade netting and aerial predator netting, and we can drape this over these areas. What happens when you need to move those chickens over? What if we want to move them over an acre? We're going to pull those poles up. How long is that netting going to last, right? Into the future, if this is a problem, you have a few options. You can post somebody out there that's out there. In the old days, in medieval times, they used to actually have kids in the field to chase off aerial predators and to work as scarecrows in the crops. That's probably not coming back, right? So what are we going to do with that? Now, what happens if we are actually moving this poultry netting, this aerial predator netting over and over? Sooner or later, it's going to fail. It's going to break. What if you can't order that off Amazon or wherever anymore? Well, you're going to make it. You're going to make that out of twine. You're going to make some kind of net. You're going to lace these poles up, and then you're going to interlace them so that it is, when the predator comes down, soars down, it doesn't get to your birds. Right? Or if it does, it's now inside there when you come out, and you can at that point dispatch it. There's probably no laws or regulations when these times come. Where are you getting that twine from? Right? Are you going to stock 10,000 yards of twine right now? Awesome. But in the future, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever, how do you make cordage? That's not even in people's head that you can make cordage. Most people have no idea that we used to make cordage. We used to make rope. People have no idea. In the poorhouses in Europe, they used to they would provide jobs for everybody. It was illegal to be homeless. So they would take people and lock them in places much like asylums. And one of the jobs that they would assign these people is taking twisted, braided fiber rope and have them pull it apart. I don't know what the product was. I think it was more of a punishment than anything. But they would take big boat ropes and untwist them. And those were made of several cords, and they would take those cords and untwist them, and they were breaking them down into the raw fibers. And it said that it made their hands bleed, and it was a miserable, terrible job. It was always stuck inside your skin. I don't know why they did that. I don't know what the product was that they were after. But to reverse that, how would you make that cordage, right? Most people don't know where chocolate milk comes from. They literally think it comes from brown cows. So it's just being exposed to that. And then just simply having the thought in your mind, man, we're moving this predator netting. What happens if we can't get this predator netting? How would we move the predator netting? What would we make it from? And then how do we make the thing that it's made from, right? A lot of it is just so simple as, I wonder where that would come from, and then just looking it up while you have the ability to do so. Now it's in your head. Now you have some kind of semblance of that as to what that's made from. You're seeing this on New Year's Day 24. This is the beginning of the year. When you're talking about the next new year, do you want to be better and further ahead than where you are, or do you want to be right where you are? If you look at 2019, that was almost 5 years ago, guys. 2019. Is that correct? That is 5 years ago. You've had 5 years when all the mayhem and the chaos and the fear started in 2019. Are you in a better position now, or are you right where you were? This is an opportunity for many of you to come together, learn and grow, and just have that spark, that ignition, put your hands on and see some proof that it's doable. We didn't bring any experts in when we started doing all this stuff. We made a ton of mistakes, and we didn't know what those mistakes were. They worked at the time, and then as you progress and you grow and you get better at things, you kind of abandon one way and move on to the next. But we had to do it the other way to get to the next way. It just wasn't on our radar, or it wasn't in our finances. When we bought this piece of property, it was overgrown. You couldn't walk through here. Literally, you couldn't walk 5 feet through here without getting tangled up in vines and thorns. And it just took hacking that stuff down. And when we first did it, it was done with machetes and a small chainsaw and mostly loppers, cutters by hand, and the little hand saws. And then as we grew, once we opened that area up, we were able to run some lawnmowers, and eventually we got a tractor. But we did most of this by hand. It's all doable. Everything that is here today, most was done by hand, just out of necessity. So when people see some of the videos and they see the drones and they're like, well, he has a tractor. That tractor didn't build this. The tractor just makes everything easier and faster now, 7 years later. In the beginning, 3 or 4 years, and all those videos are there. They're all on this YouTube channel. You can go see them when we first walked the property to see what it looked like. And then when we got the keys and when we first went in the building, you can see what it looks like now versus then. Nobody handed me a bunch of money. Nobody helped me other than some physical labor in the beginning. Some friends showed up with some saws when we came out here, and most of those saws were hand powered. Anything's doable. You just have to put time in it. This was so exciting to us that we would work 10 hours every day and then come over here for an hour or two all the way into the dark. There was no lights out here that worked when we got on the property. There wasn't even any power turned on the property when we started doing this. And then we spent every weekend here out of excitement and wonderment. We started building things, and we opened up a trail to where we could ride a bicycle through it enough. And then we opened that trail a little bit wider, and we could run an old four-wheeler down it. We just really wanted to do this. It was kind of where we were going to go and camp and hang out. When we started building this out, it wasn't even thought of as we might live here or make it a homestead. So we did all of that stuff. And we can tell you how to skip some of the processes and skip some of the mistakes. And it's all documented. We took a video of every single thing we did for the last 15 years. Even before this property, we were cutting firewood in the front yard. We had rabbits in the backyard. I had chicken. I had a HOA said you couldn't even have chickens. We had 14 chickens in the backyard. Just don't have roosters, right? It's allowed versus able. Things are much easier out of the city. Yeah, we had an HOA, but we live rural, right? They were beautiful McMansions, private lake and shit, tennis court, but the HOA, right? They're up your ass over this. They were mad I had firewood on the driveway, yet they were all asking if they could borrow firewood every time there was a storm. It's a lot easier outside the city than inside the city. We have a lot of people inside the city who seemingly are bored and comfortable, so they take joy in making other people uncomfortable. You don't have as much of that outside of the city. Just get outside of the city, and most, not all, most of your problems that exist in the city, they do not exist rural. Get yourself some freedom. Leave the city, even if you have to rent a place. Once you're on the ground outside of those cities, once you get into those smaller towns, those people selling that property that's there, they're not advertising on the internet. It doesn't exist. When you see an old car on the side of the road, there's no price tag. because the price tag is going to depend on the conversation you have with the old lady selling the car. If you sit there and you talk to her and actually take interest in what she's saying, you might find that that price is half as just if you walk up and you're like, hey, I want to buy this car. How much is it? I'm really in a hurry. She might give you a price, but those two prices might be very different. And that's how a lot of life is. It is just conversations and relationships. When you go meet the old farmer and you walk up there, and you don't go up there and go, hey, how much are your hay bales? I need to buy these many hay bales. If you walk up there and you're like, hey, and you actually genuinely take interest in his farm and how long he's been there and how long the family's been there, and how did you farm before you were farming with this gas equipment? Were there ever horses? His eyes will light up and he will talk to you. And if you take genuine interest in what people are doing, you will find the outcome to your needs are going to be very different than if it's just business. So build some relationships and get someplace where there's some people worth building relationships with, and there's some sustainability. As a young person, we always look at tomorrow. We don't look at 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. As a young person, never did we think about grandchildren and multi-generations. But if you build in that manner when you're younger, you will be a lot stronger, not only in the future, but also in your near future. We can help you. And if you want to learn, sign up right now for Homestead Apprentice. Just go to the website, homesteadapprentice.com, put your application in, build your video up, and let's see what you got.